there's an expression, isn't there, that you have to put your own oxygen mask on before helping those around you. And that's very true, I think, in terms of your personal growth in a leadership role. But how do you balance that? Those almost sometimes, are they conflicting needs? Your needs for personal development and growth and change, and the team's need for you to be there every day, kind of like showing them the path and, setting the vision and the strategy and holding them accountable. Do those two things counteract?
Sometimes it's challenging, yeah. And there's definitely be times where I would look and go, actually, I have been too conscious of my own growth and not and put too much pressure on people, because in terms of especially the last year, is I was going through a bad time and I'd lent with people and was probably more open than I should have been about how difficult it was, and I think that put other pressure on some other people, and that was unfair. But equally, they got me through it, and so I'm always be appreciative of that. But I think with my own personal journey in the business journey at the same time, is I think it's you can use some of the same analysis techniques, actually, when you're looking at yourself. And I think it's very important to be constantly holding a mirror up to yourself and looking at what you can do better. And I think that's the case of being a leader as well, is actually go, well, these things aren't working. Well, these things are working, and these things aren't working. And actually go, why is that? And actually, what can I be doing? How can I support the team to do it? What do they need from me? And how do we adapt that? Or how do I adapt to that situation? And I think the two go very hand in hand, really, because like I sort of said earlier, it's a similar strategy for me, and it's actually breaking things down into check one day at a time and dealing with it. You have to have a bit foresight into things. It's you can't just say, okay, well, I'm just going to move it. Probably you have to think more than one day ahead, obviously. But it's I think that sort of mentality of, okay, well, you can deal with anything if you do deal with that way and leading that way. I think with the sort of the communicating the strategy and things like that, and this is quite interesting actually to me, is that I was doing a whole sort of staff presentation maybe a month or a half ago, and I was sort of going through it, and I was sort of trying, in my mind, it was okay, we're making these strategic changes, and we made some redundancies, and we cut some areas that weren't commercially working at the moment. And I sort of in my mind, I thought, guys, I was just going to show all these numbers. And so actually, these things don't mean anything to most people. And actually, because I spend my entire time in a boardroom looking at P&L or chatting to a CMO or chatting to some investors or whatever it is, these things are all in my head. I actually go, okay, if I'm explaining to the company why we're doing things, I need to actually go back a couple of stages. And I got rid of all the numbers, and I actually said, okay, well, what we're doing is this, and this is the reason why we're doing it, is that a certain amount of work that we do every year came from this partners. What those companies are doing is doing this, which means this work is going to do this. And actually what's happening in the wider sphere of this is marketing has changed in the last 10 years. So the hero TVC thing that you've worked on all your career is now 10% of the marketing spend as opposed to 40%. And people just go, and they're like, okay, I get it now. You're not just making this stuff up. You're not just willy-nilly getting period of people or hiring people, changing things. It's because the strategy for what number 8 needs to do is directly in relation to what the clients are going to need. And actually, I think for me, it's always looking what's happening at a client or what's happening in the wide scope of things, or what we need to do as a business to be able to react to that isn't looking at what our competitors are doing. It's looking at where the work is coming from and the changes that those companies or those brands or are making within themselves, or what's happening as a wider scope of thing, what's happening in the global economy to be able to do that. And actually having strategy beyond that to actually be able to see as far along that stream as you can, upstream, to see what's happening, because it will affect us. Or how can we position ourselves further upstream to be able to have more control over those things, rather than being, and post-production has always been at the end of that river, we're sort of picking things up. But we sort of works when there's lots of water flowing. When there's less water, you sort of want to be a bit more upstream on that, I think.